Yeah, thank you very much for giving us the opportunity to talk about wildlife-friendly gardening with non-invasive plants. And so that's basically April and me. And I am Katharina Dien-Schmutz. I'm Associate Professor in Plant Ecology at Coventry University. So we all know that gardens are very important for wildlife, and gardeners can support wildlife in many ways. So for example, so one important point is the choice of plants, and that's where we will talk about more in this webinar, but I just want to point out very shortly other things which are very important and where we will not talk about in further detail, like things like establishing a garden pond, which is known to increase the biodiversity. So it's the one thing, if you do it in your garden, it will increase the biodiversity in your garden the most. If you have like a diverse structure, like trees and shrubs, you leave patches of long grass, we have currently still the no mow May, and you leave piles of logs and bricks, and also very important, you don't use pesticides. And we have here some links. So if you want to know anything more about wildlife gardening, there's a really good organization, this is the Wildlife Gardening Forum. And when you look on their webpage, they have loads of information. And of course, also the IHS has a very good webpage on biodiversity in gardens. So today, we want to spend more time looking at the choice of plants. Because with the choice of plants, it's very important not just to support wildlife in garden, but also to prevent plant invasions or plants escaping from gardens and becoming invasive plants. Because ornamental plants are actually the major source for plant invasions all over the world. So in every country where people look at the pathways, how ornamental plants have, or how invasive plants have, where they originate from, it's always the majority of plants have been deliberately introduced and first used as ornamental plants before they then spread out of gardens. So that's why it's so important which plants you choose. So if you look, for example, at the Flora of the British Isles, there's a very nice book from Stace and Crawley, published now 60 years ago. And they found, so they did a very good assessment of all the alien plants in Britain, that there are more than 2,000 alien species in the British flora. And you should compare this to the number of native species, which is about 1,560. So we have already more alien species, alien plants than natives in the British flora. And altogether, they estimate that there are about 4,000 aliens. So if you would also exclude extinct and very rare alien species. So alien species can also get extinct. So it's not that all of these are spreading and very widely distributed. But then if you look at these 2,000 plants, then you can see that the majority of these have been introduced intentionally for horticulture. And it's also very important to say that only very few of these alien plants have actually major negative impacts. So even though most are ornamental introductions, only very few of the plants that escape gardens can become problematic and have negative impacts. So it's very important, but still it's very important to identify these few so we can all still have fun with ornamental alien plants in our gardens without doing any harm to outside to any wildlife. Yeah, this is just to show you very shortly what Stace and Crawley have analyzed in their book, and you can see this on top. This is the number of species that have been introduced originally for horticulture and can now be found in the British flora. The next common one is way below. That's introductions with wool. So this is not a pathway which is very active anymore. So this is mainly from wool imported maybe 100 years ago to the wool mills, and in this wool from the sheep there were seeds from plants. So these are also mainly accidental introductions. Yeah, and then you can see all these other small and less important pathways. So if we look at the economic impacts of these invasive species, so there has been an assessment of all invasive species in Britain. It's now more than 10 years old, but still they came up with a very impressive number of economic costs of 1.7 billion per year. So that's probably today much more. And it's also important to keep in mind that they mainly looked at control costs. But if you look at this list of the, I think it's 15 plants here, so the top most expensive ones, there are basically 4 plants included. And out of these, 3 have been originally introduced as ornamental species. Yeah, just to show you one example, which probably most people are familiar with and have seen. This is Rhododendron ponticum, and it's native here around the Black Sea, but also has native occurrences in Portugal and in Spain. And from there, it has actually been introduced to Britain in the 18th century. So this is basically just to underline the definition, what is an invasive species. It's a species which has been transported outside its natural range by human assistance and is now spreading and has an economic or negative impact in this new non-native range. There's actually also occurrences here in the Netherlands and I think in Belgium, and there are some is also established in Norway. And it's also important to keep in mind that so this invasiveness definition we use here includes that the species has negative impacts. But ecologists often use the term, or originally used the term invasive to include all species that are established and then spreading in the new range, even if there were no documented negative impacts. But here we always, when we mention invasive species, we mean the ones which have negative impacts. Yeah, just to point out here again, so the species was introduced in 1763 and then first recorded in the wild in 1841. So this is a time lag of 78 years. And it then took another 100 years before it was actually recognized that it is a problem, and also control measures started, maybe even later than these 100 years. And this is very important to keep in mind, that the plants we have now in our gardens so it could take a very long time until they will become problematic and cause these big impacts. So next, let us just look at, so why are these ornamental plants so successful? Of course, the first reason is that people select these plants that they grow well. Of course, you wouldn't try to plant lots of plants that are not growing in this climate. And also it's the total number of plants that is available. So here I have tried to demonstrate how many plants are actually available as ornamental plants in Britain. And it's sometimes it's quite surprising, I think, because there's this nice book, this is the Plant Finder, which was first published in 1985. And in this book, when they published it the first time, they listed 22,000 plants, which of course includes cultivars. So that's very important and to keep in mind. But and this is quite a recent period, I think, when you going up to the latest edition, we have now 81,000 plants, also including cultivars. And it's not really known how many of these are species. But so some species have, like rhododendron, there I think there's more than 500 cultivars from one species. And so, but even if we estimate that there just a quarter would be species, then that's still 10 times more than the number of native species in the British flora. So now our problem is we have 81,000 plants on sale, which all will go at least once maybe, or in all the gardens we have here, 22 million gardens. And so we have, if we take this and also think about the lag times I showed for rhododendron, and I mean the average, so rhododendron is more on the fast side, the average time lag for a species from the time of introduction and first record outside of a garden is 125 years. This basically means that all our future invasive plants are already in our gardens. So we've also here just to remind you of the number of plants and the number of non-native species. So now we have a chance basically to prevent these plants that are already in our garden to spread outside and become future problem species. And that's why we, this is here just to show you a few, and this is basically where we come in with our plant alert project. So we want basically to find these plants before they actually have a chance to spread outside, and to act earlier and not wait 100 years. And so I think in the next part, so these are some plants we have already identified with plant alerts that are not yet a big problem outside gardens maybe, but already spreading in gardens, and they might be problematic in the future. And so in the next bit, April will tell you more about these plants and what could be nice alternatives, so we don't have to have them anymore and don't plant them very widely, then we can still prevent them spreading outside gardens.
So, what can be done if you've got an ornamental plant in your garden which is causing you trouble? This is where Plant Alert comes in. So if a researcher comes and does a one-off survey in your garden to look at the ornamental plants growing, they're only going to see a snapshot. They don't see the gardener's management or the plant's long-term behaviour within it. So Plant Alert is a long-term, open-ended citizen science project covering the UK, which we launched in 2019. The aim of the project is to prevent future plant invasions by identifying invasive ornamental plants before they become a problem. It's based on the knowledge that most invasive plants with negative impacts on the environment have been introduced, as Katharina's already mentioned, as ornamental garden plants. And we believe gardeners are therefore well placed to spot potentially invasive plants early on. Plant Alert is an online recording system. It's hosted by the Botanical Society of Britain and Ireland. You might know the BSBI. They do most of the botanical recording in the UK. And this gives us the benefit of linking all the data from Plant Alert to their database and long-term recording efforts into the future. So how does Plant Alert actually work? We're reliant on gardeners of all abilities telling us about the plants in their gardens, which are spreading and or are difficult to control, however lovely they may be. It's solely a web-based submission system. You may only have 1 or 2 plants to report from your garden at one point. The next time, maybe in several years. The web page is designed in a way that it works easily on a mobile phone, so you can report even while you're in the garden if you really wanted to. When you report a garden plant to us, this allows us to map your plant records against those of botanical recorders across the UK. So we can start to see which plants are making the move out of gardens and into the wild and at what rate. The information you provide allows us to gather data on how the plant originally came into the garden, how people are managing the plant in question, methods of disposal, and how effective these actually are. All of this gives us a base to make recommendations for species assessments and to take part in horizon scanning exercises for future invasives in Britain. Hopefully, many ornamental plants in your garden will spread, and this is a sign they are growing really, really well. We only want to know about those garden plants that are spreading to an extent that you have to control them to prevent them overgrowing other plants or parts of your garden where you don't want them. So such qualities include easily setting seed, spreading by rhizome or stolon, regrowth from root fragments, vigorous or dominant growth habit. So we're not interested in garden weeds, so those plants that are not ornamental plants but are probably growing really, really well in your garden and are brilliant for wildlife. However, if you're not sure if a plant you have to manage is a weed or an ornamental, just report it and we can double check our end. We'd rather have the record than not. If you don't feel confident in identifying the plant in question, we still want your record, although it is essential you provide photos. So alongside the array of books available, there are a number of ID apps you can use. There's been some recent research through the BSBI into how effective these apps are, and the results are in this table. From personal experience, using Google Lens is simple and fast. From that, utilising the RHS website can be great for finding out further information on the plant in question. The key thing I cannot stress enough is to include several photos of your plant and make sure you have included an email address at our end. We'd rather have the record than not. If you don't feel confident in identifying the plant in question, we still want your record, although it is essential you provide photos. So alongside the array of books available, there are a number of ID apps you can use. There's been some recent research through the BSBI into how effective these apps are, and the results are in this table. From personal experience, using Google Lens is simple and fast. From that, utilising the RHS website can be great for finding out further information on the plant in question. The key thing I cannot stress enough is to include several photos of your plant and make sure you have included an email address so we can get in touch if we do have any questions. As of May 2021, we've received 194 individual species records from 500 unique records. The image you're seeing here is from our results page. Here you can click on the page markers, see the results in that area of plants people have reported in their gardens, have a bit of a spy, see what else is causing trouble in other people's gardens in your local area. I've also included some of our most frequently reported plants that you can see on the right-hand side here, which you can also see on our results page, and that changes as the results are updated regularly. So I'll give you a few moments just to have a look at that list, see if you recognise any you may have in your own garden or not. So in the following slides, I have included a number of frequently reported ornamental plants and swaps which attract and support wildlife, a range of wildlife really, such as bees, butterflies, insects, mammals and birds. I've used some native species which have fantastic cultivars which you can go on to discover. I must stress at this point, even if something is labelled as native, please do not plant any garden plant anywhere other than in your garden. This also applies to their disposal. Always dispose of it in your garden waste. So the first highly invasive we have here is Snowberry. This is a species with a risk assessment, and indeed the plant alert approach is not adding much to what we already know. This is one of the widest spread ornamental species in the UK outside of gardens. We've swapped this option out for Elder Sambucus nigra, black lace. This is a beautiful shrub which can be used as hedging or a border focal point. Liking a moist but well-drained soil in full sun or partial shade, it's quite a versatile plant. If you've ever made elderflower cordial, these black varieties produce a stunning pinky purple cordial, so it's quite a good fun thing to have. The flowers and berries are extremely popular with a variety of insects, bugs and of course birds. So Himalayan honeysuckle is already quite well spread by the number of records within the BSBI database outside of gardens. It's being used as a decorative border shrub and as cover in large-scale plantings. We've received 19 records. It's the fourth most frequent species in our list and is now the first species being reported to the non-native species secretary carry out to be recommended for a risk assessment. We also get comments stating this species is spreading in woodland, close to houses, so this reinforces the need for a rapid risk assessment of this plant. An alternative is Gordon's currant, which is an attractive ornamental currant with aromatic dark green leaves. In late spring and early summer, these dense trusses of small red and yellow flowers appear. They are extremely attractive to bees and other pollinators. It prefers a moist soil and full sun. But again, another good choice for hedging or border structure. You could, of course, if you use red or black currants, or indeed gooseberry if you wanted an edible alternative. They're all a really good choice. And of course, those berries, if you want to share them with wildlife, are a good choice for our garden birds as well. So looking at climbers, Salmonberry Rubber spectabilis has recently started rapidly spreading, mainly in Scotland and Ireland. So this is a species we're keeping an eye on and would appreciate any further records if you have experience of it. An alternative is a clematis cultivar Hagley hybrid, which is a compact, deciduous, strong climber, which benefits from light shade to produce the best flower coloration from summer all the way to early autumn. And it's also great on a north-facing wall, so it's quite a good doer. And again, really good for a range of pollinators, including bees. In terms of ground cover, Houtinia cordata. You may well have seen this in a number of nurseries and garden centres, notably in the aquatic section as well. This is an invasive ornamental which doesn't have many records in the UK, but it has started to spread since the year 2000, you can see here. The 9 records we have are in locations where it has not yet actually been found outside of gardens. So from the feedback we've had, it is known to be very difficult to control. An alternative is sweet woodruff, Gallium odoratum. This makes a wonderful ground cover in shady areas, including under trees and hedges. It provides a natural habitat for invertebrates and pollinators and brings a wash of white in potentially gloomier areas. It's one of my favourites. So in terms of grasses and more architectural plants, I'm highlighting here New Zealand windgrass. Since the year 2000, this New Zealand native grass has continued to increase as it has been used as a feature ornamental in mass plantings and to soften border lines. But it self-seeds rapidly and very, very readily. A UK native grass swap is tufted hairgrass. The tufted hairgrass cultivar Discampsia septicosa gold towel. Gold towel is a smaller growing option to other tufted hairgrasses that are available. It has really lovely, long-lasting flower plumes, which I think give a really beautiful shimmering effect as they mature in the summer. This grows well in well-drained but moist, rich soils in full sun or partial shade. It does like acidic conditions, but I have seen it growing elsewhere. It provides cover from mammals and insects making their way through your garden, as well as giving structure. The stems look stunning in the frost as well, so it really is a sort of all year round grass. So some further ideas. This is just for you to have a look at in your own time, but included on this slide are a few other species which could be used in wildlife gardening when being mindful of invasive ornamentals. So all apart from Fuchsia genii are native plants with a range of cultivars available. However, these natives themselves work very well in garden settings, and I would encourage you to look into them when looking at planting for wildlife. An additional key thing to note is to provide as long a flowering period as possible. So from February, March, all the way through into deep autumn to support pollinators from when they emerge all the way through their life cycle. So it's something to think about when you're looking at planting for wildlife. So I'll give you a few moments just to take a look at those and take them on board. So to conclude, how you as a gardener can help. Use non-invasive ornamentals in your garden. Remember to use native species as well. Do your research on the plants you're buying. Make use of advice from the RHS. I cannot stress enough. They have got a host of information available on hundreds, thousands of plants that are on sale. Utilise the knowledge of growing nurseries as well to gain a full picture of the plant's habit. So when you're in that nursery, ask the staff there about the plant's habit. Don't just rely on the plant's label to tell you everything. So going forward, submit any records of problematic ornamental plants to Plant Alert. If you've got something in your garden that's being a bit thuggish, that's causing you problems, put it onto our Plant Alert records so we can track it and see what's happening into the future with if other people have the same problem. And the third thing is keep all garden plants from spreading into the wild by following the Bee Plant-Wise guidance. You can see the link there at the bottom of the page. It is fantastic. So know what you grow. Be mindful when sharing plants. You may be passing on invasive species, pests and disease. Be responsible. Keep your plants in your garden. Don't plant them or allow them to grow out of your garden or into the wild. Dispose of unwanted plants responsibly using council green waste or home composting. Never dump plants outside of the garden, and be aware when you are transporting garden waste of the potential for material to be lost en route. So like I say, the Bee Plant-Wise website has got a load of fantastic information on how we can all be responsible gardeners and looking after the environment, as well as taking responsibility for what we're planting and how we're growing it. And with that, I thank you so much for listening, and Katharina and I look forward to receiving your Plant Alert records now and into the future. And hopefully, I've seen we've got some bits going on the chat, so I shall.
Yeah, thank you both for such lovely talks. Lots to think about, and it's made me really hope some nice weather this weekend to get out into the garden. I thought what you were saying about prevention just being so important in dealing with invasive species. So Plant Alert is just going to be a great tool for that, for the invaders of the future. If we can prevent things from becoming a problem in the first place, and it saves time, money, the environment, everything. So yeah, really useful tool. Shall I go through? I'll read out any questions to you and then let you answer them. So I think the first one we've got here, can you suggest any good swaps for tidal or brackish areas?
Ooh.
It might be worth mentioning that there'll be more kind of swaps coming later, the sort of piece of work that you're doing.
Katharina, do you want to?
Yeah, I think that's really difficult with tidal. I mean, we know it's an area where we have quite a lot, like Rosa rugosa and also Cortaderia, pampas grass is often planted in these areas, and these are really problematic species. So I can see the point that we need to think about alternatives. So I don't have one at the top of my head, but maybe April. But just use the opportunity to mention that what we are working currently on a list of non-invasive or less risky invasive garden ornamental plants, which and we have maybe I just mentioned the criteria we have for selecting these species. So for these we make sure that they are not widespread or naturalized in Britain already. So we check this with the BSBI. They have a great database. So we make sure that any plants that have already records outside of gardens are not on the list, or maybe they have just a very few. And if they have a very few, we we check in other databases. So also we check for all the plants that are on the list that they are not known to be invasive in any other countries, because this is a very good criterion which has been proven to be one of the best, basically, to predict of any plant, if any plant might become invasive anywhere else. We also check that they are widely available, which is also important because maybe a plant is already in the country, but not really planted anywhere. So it wouldn't have had a chance, basically, to spread outside. So it's difficult then to judge that it is not one which has the potential to spread outside gardens. And we also make sure that the plant hasn't been introduced just now. So that's also where we use the plant finder for. We check in an older edition of the plant finder if the plant was already popular, maybe 20 years, or sometimes even in the very earliest edition of the plant finder. Because then we know if a plant has been a popular garden plant for more than, we can only go that far back to some extent because we don't have a plant finder before. If it has been very popular and widely planted for 40 years or so, then and it hasn't escaped, then it's also a sign that it might be less likely to do this in the future. Of course, there are always quite a lot of uncertainties on this. And also to say, if any plant is not on the list, that doesn't mean it is an invasive problematic species. But because we recommend these plants for non-invasive gardening, we want to be very, very sure. So we have excluded quite a lot of species that have been in previous versions, but this is not to say these are bad plants. So we always want to emphasize this. I don't know if, April, have you come up with an idea for a title?
I haven't yet, but I'll look into it, and we can put it maybe in the links after the session. I've just seen on the chat someone's just mentioned that Plant Life and the RHS have produced a good booklet called Gardening Without Harmful Invasive Plants. We're basically updating that booklet and producing a refreshed list. So those lists will be heading out sooner rather than later, hopefully. So when they're out and about, we'll put them on our Twitter and things like that. And I'm sure the Non-Native Species Secretariat will.
Yeah, people can contact us if they'd like to be kept updated, and we can send out a link when they're available.
Yeah.
I can just see there's another question there. Can plant alert be used for already escaped garden plants? Yes. So the only criterion is that it is still in a garden. So if it's spreading in your garden and you want to report it, it doesn't matter if it is already outside or not. So just, there is also a box. So if you report it and you have seen it also growing outside in near your garden, then you can tick the box and say, yes, I have noticed it also close by. So this gives us some additional evidence.
Yeah, and for anything outside the garden, you can report any non-native species records to iRecord. So I'll put that link in the email tomorrow as well.
I've just seen in the chat as well, someone's put about bamboo species. Yes, they are very painful to identify down to species level. So if you don't know the species name or you don't know the plant name, always include photographs. You can put unknown plants in the heading when you're writing a record, but just include an email address and put as many photos of the plant as you can. If it's in flower, the overall situation, so we can see it in terms of size compared to other plants in your garden. Details of the leaf and the stem are perfect. So don't panic. If you don't know what a plant is, but it's causing absolute havoc, we still want to know about it. Just put some photos in and an email address.
I'm looking at the. There's someone asking about Lycisteria formosa, which they have just planted in their front garden.
Oh.
Yeah, I think maybe you keep an eye on it. I wouldn't go now and rip it off. I think it's mainly spread by birds. I think that's a problem. Then it's difficult. I don't know if you want to remove the berries, but they look quite nice, so it's a feature of the plant. So, it is still widely planted. So I know, and we also, the other part of the question was professional gardeners. So we have some professional gardeners. I think there's someone in Manchester. Where is she? I don't know. She's very active, and it's very nice. So we get loads of she reports from the gardens of her customers, basically. And that's really good, because then professional gardeners are also often very, very knowledgeable about the plants, and we can be very sure with the identification. So that's quite good.
It's been really nice because she's actually spread the word to her clients about Plant Alert. So although she's doing the recording on their behalf, it's getting the word out there. So it's lovely. So if you are a professional gardener going around different people's gardens, we still, your records are invaluable. I've seen a question here. Is there anyone checking records on Plant Alert to make sure they're correct? The answer is yes, it's Katharina and I. So we check records regularly. We've also got a number of botanical experts. If there's anything that we're not sure about, specific species, they go out and are double checked by them. So every species that comes into us is checked. It does take quite a while because we've had quite a few come in, but that is why it's essential you provide photos. If you don't provide photos and it's an unknown plant, we've got no chance. So it's why photos are essential.
But then, of course, we also have problems. I think someone mentioned bamboos. Bamboo is the problem for us as well. If you see a picture, it's I don't know what to do about it. So maybe we need a project where we just look at bamboos and ask people to send something in, and I don't know.
If there's any growers of bamboo that are specialists at identifying them, please get in touch.
Yeah. And there's another point, someone saying he bought something of euphorbia from a nursery, and it has now spread over his garden. Should the nurseries? Yeah, I think that's what we are. Also, what is an aim where we think that nurseries or gardeners should be more aware that their customers are basically not happy if they buy plants which are then become a problem in their gardens. And it would be quite easy to include some information. Maybe keep some plants in a pot. Don't plant them next to a river or to some other wetlands, or put a barrier or whatever. Or maybe don't plant or don't sell them at all. Some of them maybe.
I think
but it's a voluntary process also that nurseries decide on their own. Maybe some plants we don't want anymore. So
I think, as Katharina was always saying, one of our aims of Plant Alert is to work with the horticultural industry and sort of connect that, the species that when you enter a record, you can say, I wish this had been on the plant label, that this spread like this. So it's really important that we as customers obviously feed this back to nurseries, but it is a real joined up approach. So the more you can tell us via Plant Alert, I wish this had been reported, should it have been written on the label that it's a problem, the more we can then add in. It's more information we can feed back to the industry as well. So there definitely needs to be more of a joined up approach when it comes to nurseries and the industry as a whole. So hopefully that will happen in time. Katharina, while you're still doing that, there was just a question on the chat about things that are already known as invasive, such as Mumbricia. It's a worthwhile record.
Yes, yeah.
So things that we still know as invasive, please, and send them in, such as Mumbricia. It's very much a valid record.
Please, if you have put any plants in the answer garden, now go and put it in Plant Alert, please. You can see we use the evidence, and we hope we get some good results. And also, I think April said it already, but so this is an ongoing project. It's not that we are just doing this year or so. So the aim is to keep it open, basically as part of the BSBI recording efforts, and to have it there. So maybe in 10 years we can also look at trends. We can say suddenly plants are now spreading outside gardens because the climate has changed or so. And then if we start now putting stuff in and we keep on going, we hope it will really provide a very good database. And we are also using it already. So I do sometimes also risk assessments for the Non-Native Species Secretariat, and I can tell you the evidence is used. So if I have an assessment for a species, and I will go and check the database in Plant Alert and see has this species been reported? So it is not just that we would report to the non-native species secretariat, maybe with the Lycisteria we mentioned as a potential species which might be worth to have a risk assessment, but also the other way around. We hope that the evidence we collect will be accessed by the non-native species secretariat and other organizations. So the data are there, and it's not that we are going to keep them for us. So the aim is to be very open and transparent and make them available.
I think, I'm afraid that's probably all we've got time for. I'm just going to put our email address in the chat box. So if anyone does have any other questions, if you contact us, and I will pass those on. As I said, we'll send out an email tomorrow with all the links and everything that we discussed in the presentation. And that will be, the talk itself will be available online in a couple of days if you want to revisit it or share it with anyone else. So yeah, thank you to everyone for attending, and thank you very much to our presenters today for such a brilliant talk. It was really interesting and really useful. I hope everyone enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, bye-bye.